It is so good to be with you again this morning. And you know what is good? It's good seeing so many people here. And our guests who have come here today, thank you so much for coming to Swan Valley Church. And I hope that you find Jesus here with us, and that through our fellowship, you become a little bit closer to his people and enjoy your experience here. Thank you for choosing us this morning. Of course, members, you're always welcome, you know that, and we couldn't do church without you. And I just love seeing the new people stepping up and leading out this morning. Thank you for stepping up. You know, I just love seeing dads showing their kids the way. And that's my whole sermon this morning is on leaving a legacy and teaching our faith to our children and to others. And Deb, crutches and all, girl, nothing stopped you, hey? That was so good to see you up there at the front as well. I hope I haven't missed anyone, but all you new ones that are serving up at the moment, and there's a whole list of you, thank you for giving God some of your time and your talents. Just a few things. One is that, and I feel like a broken record, but it's just that poor Jenny and I get the nasty jobs of saying, sorry, you can't serve today because you haven't done your compliance. And so to make it easier on us, please do it. We've got to watch out for it. We need to keep our church the safest place we can in order to share the gospel message with as many as we can. I've got a personal interest in it because I personally was abused by a deacon in the church. And it's in my head all the time. You never get away from it. And we don't want those scars on our kids or anyone. Making a safe place is for everyone to come and worship here on a Sabbath morning. And so that's why we do it for, and that's why we look out for it for. So Jenny isn't a big nasty, and I'm not big and nasty. We're just trying to create a safe place for God's gospel to touch hearts for God's soon return. Deacons and deaconesses, I'm so looking forward to meeting with you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock in the hall. We need to kick off the year in a big way. I've got things on my heart I want to share with you, and I know that your leaders will as well. And we're going to have a good hour or so together as we eat together. We're having breakfast together, and we're also, I want to share a bit of a word with you as a theme for the year for you in your serving. And deacons, and deaconesses, we're going to be stronger if you see your role as a ministry and as spiritual. And I want to meet with you tomorrow at 9 o'clock here in the hall. Just quickly as well, if you go around the freezers, they are stuffed full. They are really, really full. We have been so blessed over the last 3 or 4 days of food coming in. 2 pallet loads coming yesterday. We're just so blessed. Now, it's not just meat. There's mixed veggies and veggies there. So those of you who cook casseroles and who can help out with that area, I will go after church and just pull the roller door so you can have a look in the freezer there and pull out what you want. We need to try and lower it a bit because there'll be more blessings coming yet this week. I am a few casseroles down because a lady who cooks 12 a week has had a fall, and so she's out for a couple of weeks. And so those of you who chip in here and there, it might just be the time to get that oven cranked up and help blessing God's people and help creating stories like what Di's sharing that happens at Midland Meals. Miracles happen in ministry. Miracles happen at Midland Meals because all of us do our little bit. Even if you're just buttering buns in the kitchen, that's a part of making God's miracles happen. And we want to share with the world that they will know that Jesus is real because they see Jesus in us. My sermon series this quarter is Deserts into Gardens. We're going through the book of Joshua, and we're going through chapter by chapter. And last week we did an introduction and we looked at chapter 1, and I thought, what's the big thing that God's saying here? and that was that he said to Joshua, when Joshua first took over, I will be with you. And that's a message that Joshua needed to hear, and it's a message that we need to hear as well today in our everyday roles, our everyday homes, our everyday life. We need to know that whatever we're doing, God is with us. Now, I found a second theme in that chapter, and I had to stop a bit. And I'm going to bounce out of that to get to it, because I believe it's a topic I need to share with you this morning. And that is because there's a few of us that we've had a lot of changes in our church, a lot of changes going on with the new nominating officers taking their places. And a few that have held on offices for years might be thinking, what's going on here? I'm not needed anymore, am I? We're all needed. No matter how old we are all needed. And that's my sermon this morning. It's on leaving a legacy. What are we leaving behind for our children and our grandchildren? And the older I get, the more important it is that I see that I leave on my kids blessings that God's given me through legacies that have been handed down to me through my families and my grandparents. And I want to share about that this morning. And so last week we looked at God is with us. Today we're looking at your life story matters. Your life story matters. So let's get into the picture and where I want to bounce out of and go to Joshua 1, back to where we were last week. Let's go back to Joshua 1 and we want to read the first 5 verses. Joshua 1 and the first 5 verses. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, therefore, arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I'm giving you to them, the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, as I said to Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and to the great the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will also be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. That's a pretty amazing sentence there. And he says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. What a powerful promise. What a powerful statement he's making to Joshua here. And as I said last week, it's almost as if he's won the territory, won the battle before he goes in with his people. But if you were to lay out that map on Google and see all the territory that was given to him, it's amazing. They only took a part of it. They left the rest. They didn't conquer the whole land how God asked them to do. They only were able to take part of it because they doubted this promise. They doubted these words. They doubted that God was going to be with them, and too much human brain, too much humanness came into their thinking, and it stultified them as God's people. And they didn't leave the legacy for their next generations that they should have. And many of the troubles came upon them because they didn't take the land they should have and take what God had given them. Also note here in this passage as well is that Abraham had the promise that was then given to Moses. Moses took the legacy from Abraham, and Moses gave that legacy at his death to Joshua. Joshua took that. God had promised he would be with Abraham. God had promised he would be with Moses. God has promised that he will be with Joshua. And so the legacy of faith is being passed down from generation to generation here. You too, you and I, today here in 2024, we are modern day Joshua's, modern day Abraham's, modern day Moses's. We too have a mission. We too have a calling on our life. We too have a promised land to lay hold of. And we tend to forget in our everyday life one little matter. We love Jesus. We love serving God. But when we ask, what is the evidence for God? What is the evidence for your Jesus? We all too often go back and say, I must study this, must study that, without realising today, church, today, young people, today, senior people, you are the evidence that there is a God. You and I are the evidence that there is a God. And we take that evidence into our church here, where our children are watching us worship. When they're watching us worship, when they're watching us as adults relate to God, we are the evidence for God to them. You and I are the evidence for God, evidence for Jesus in our workplaces. It was such a lovely thing this week for me as I mingled with people, and one of my now leaders in Midland Mills came and said to me, I know so-and-so in this business, and they said that they know you. They're beautiful people. You've got beautiful people in your church. I thought, great, that's the evidence that there is a God. That's the evidence that our church loves. And then in your homes, my home, we've got to realise that we are the evidence for God, for Jesus, to our kids and our grandkids. And that's a pretty serious statement. It makes me step back and say, Loren Pratt, what are you doing with your life? What are you doing? Because at the end of my life, do my kids know that Jesus lives, that God reigns, because they see him in my life as the evidence? And the scary thing is, if they ever have kids, that their kids will know that God exists, that God is real, because of the evidence I leave in my kids. It goes generation to generation to generation. And it means that, hey, we need to snap to it and realise it's not about theory. And theory is good. It's about a personal, day-by-day relationship with Jesus that jumps out of my heart into my children, into my friends, into my family, into my loved ones, and into those in the church. We are never off duty. The evidence needs to come out of my life. The most common phrase I hear of people who move to palliative care and they know that they're coming to the end of their life is that, I wish I could leave something behind that goes beyond me. I wish I could leave something behind that goes beyond me. We can. The evidence of Jesus, lived well in yours and my life, is the legacy we must give. Come with me to our text for the day, Genesis 23, 1 to 20. Genesis 23, 1 to 20. A great story of a guy who left an evidence behind, a great story of a legacy leaving, and we learn 4 lessons from this passage. Sarah lived 127 years, and these were the years of the life of Sarah. So Sarah died in Kiriath Araba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Then Abraham stood up from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I'm a foreigner and a visitor among you. Give me property for the burial place among you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. And the sons of Heth answered Abraham and said to him, Hear us, my lord. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold from you his burial place, that you may bury your dead. Then Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, the sons of Heth. And he spoke to them, saying, If it is your wish that I bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and meet with Ephron, the son of Zohar, for me, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he has, which is at the end of his field. Let him give it to me at full price, as a property for the burial place among you. Now Ephron dwelt among the sons of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the presence of the sons of Heth, all who entered the gate of this city, saying, No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my sons of my people. I give it to you. Bury your dead. Then Abraham bowed himself down before the people of the land, and he spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, If you will give it, please hear me. I will give you money for the field. Take it from me, and I will bury the dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, My lord, listen to me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is it between you and me? So bury your dead. And Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out the silver for Ephron, which he had named in the hearing of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, currency of the merchants. So the field of Ephron, which was Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field of the cave which was in it, and all the trees that were in the field were within it. All the surrounding borders were deeded to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the sons of Heth. Therefore, whoever went into the gate of his city, and after this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, before Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave that is in it were deeded to Abraham by the sons of Heth as property for a burial place. Okay, quite a long passage, quite a story, and maybe different than your Uncle Arthur's bedtime stories. The Heth, in that translation, that comes out, they were the Hittites. And so Abraham was in their land. He was a foreigner. And this exchange goes on. And so remember this passage we just read. I want to draw out 4 points from it. I want to say firstly, what we leave behind reveals our priorities. What we leave behind reveals our priorities. That's why Abraham was so concerned to bury Sarah in a proper manner in this foreign country he was in. What we leave behind unveils whether we pointed to Jesus or ourselves in our lives. What we leave behind unveils what we pointed to, whether we pointed to Jesus or ourselves in our lives. More on that in a minute. God's plan for the church is that we pass the baton on to the next generation. That's why we are here. And so, seniors, those who may not have roles of significance in the church at the moment, you have a significant role. You have to help me as your pastor. We have to pass the baton on. We have to make sure that our young people know the faith. And that's a spiritual role, and it's a role that we must do because they will see Jesus at the end of this work that we do. Okay, my first point in able to pass the baton of faith on to the next generation is this. 1, we need to coach the next generation. We need to coach the younger ones. We need to coach our kids in the ways of the Lord. That's my first point for the morning. We need to coach our kids, our young people, our church in the ways of the Lord. Abraham left a legacy of this by what he taught. He left it by what he taught. And Genesis 18 verse 9 tells us that then they said to him, "Where is Sarah your wife?" So he said, "Here in the tent." I may have missed something completely there, but we'll go on. Abraham stated the pattern of teaching the faith to his children and to their children and to their children, the pattern that goes on even in the church today. Several hundred years after Abraham, Moses wrote these words, saying in Deuteronomy 6, 4-9, Deuteronomy 6, 4-9, Moses wrote about passing on the baton to the children. Deuteronomy 6, 4-9. I'm waiting for this one because this is quite a significant one, and the next text will be significant as well, and we can build the sermon from there. Deuteronomy 6, 4-9. We read this one last week. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them whether you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." Moses wrote these commands, and these are the commands that have been handed down and are still handed down to the Jewish people today. And that's why you see them with those funny little boxes that they wear and that type of thing, and on their houses as well, on their front doorposts. They've got this Shema, they call it the Shema, there. And the thing is that they were to pass the faith of Jesus down next generation. It was to be done orally. And so they were to talk about it, live it, love Jesus, love God openly before each generation. There's a challenge there to you and I. Do we openly love, share Jesus so that those watching us can see? Because those following, they become us. They become us. And so generation after generation after generation here has taught these principles to their children and passed the baton on. Those of us who want to leave a legacy, are we passing the baton on? Do those coming behind us see that we love Jesus? And you know, the calling to pass the baton on continues with Christians. Come with me to Ephesians 6 verse 4. Ephesians 6 verse 4. And your fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. All of us, I know, have got young people in our lives, have got people following us. There's a challenge here to us to pass on the faith that we have, to pass that on diligently to our children, to those following us. And that could be any age. While the children have life, while we have life, are they seeing in our actions and our reactions the love of Jesus? Or do we have to catch ourselves continually? And you might say, Lauren, I'm human. I muck up. And no, I do as well. I've got more of that in a minute. Hold on to the sermon. I've got more of that in a minute. Secondly, we find that in the story of Abraham in the land of Hittites, he made godly choices with enduring consequences. What happened was that these Hittites tried to get him to bargain with him and get him to, they said, we'll give you the land for your burying Sarah, but it came with hooks. And those hooks meant that he had to compromise himself, compromise his family, and compromise the beliefs that God had given him. And he said, no, I can't do it. Now, it was the little things. They're only small. You read them and do a bit of research. It was only small. But the consequences were going to be huge in the legacy he wanted to leave behind. And here's my point. Here's a faith lesson for this morning if you learn nothing more. It's not what you do some of the time that matters. It's the choices you make most of the time. And you might say, oh, Lauren, I can breathe a bit easier. Because like you, me too, I muck up continually. I'm constantly chasing the devil out of my life. He's constantly on my tail. I'm constantly making mistakes when I need to ask God's forgiveness, ask my family's forgiveness. I know we're human. But isn't this comforting? It's not what you do some of the time that matters. It's the choices you make most of the time. Abraham made some muck-ups too. And they're written in the Bible for all to see for eternity. They're there. But he is called a friend of God because it's the choices he made most of the time that counted. And that's encouraging for you and I in our everyday life. And as you get to my age, when I'm 50-something, you think, whoa, I've made some big blunders and I've done some things wrong. And some people can see things in me that aren't very godlike, aren't very Christian. It's the choices we make most of the time that matter. And you know what? In the little ones that are watching us, they know that. They see that. And that's so encouraging for you and I to keep on living the way of faith, the way of the Bible to our people. Point number 3. Develop a character free of compromise. So Abraham goes back to these guys, Ephron and these Hittites, and says, I'm not coming at that. I don't like your bargain. It means I've got to compromise my faith in God. And he said, let me pay it. Let me pay for the land. And they went back and thought, hey, we can take this guy out a bit here. And so they bumped up the price to 400 shekels for the land. They bumped it right up. And even though he was being ripped off, he came ahead and paid that because he wanted to leave a legacy that he was not going to cheat in this area here either. And so he paid more than he should have. He paid an inflated price to get this land. And my point from this is, a character free from compromise verifies your godly action. We remember Abraham because of his godly actions through his life. And because in his life he failed to compromise here. And there's a lesson for you and I, in yours and my everyday life. We need our godly action to be on display, free of compromise. A character free from compromise shouts that you're God's child, you're God's man, you're God's woman. Point number 4. So we've got this is our 4th in my little sermon series here. Give them ways to remember God's goodness. So I'm not sure if it's possible there, Amanda, to back up and just go over those 4 points. These are the 4 points I want you to remember. Those of us who are into legacy giving off back to the next generation. My first point this morning was coach them in the way of the Lord. Coach them in the way of the Lord. My second point this morning, make godly choices with enduring consequences. Make godly choices. My third point this morning, develop a character free from compromise. And now we go to the 4th point. Give them ways to remember God. Abraham did this in this story, and it's a pattern that you and I that are wanting to pass on our faith to our next generation can do that, no matter who they are. In Abraham, I'm just winding down to it. Purchasing the tomb in this foreign land where Abraham was amongst the Hittites was a witness to those coming after him. What he did was he put his money where his mouth was, so to say. He said, we're to take land. God's given us what he has promised us. We're in a foreign country that God is giving us, and he went ahead and bought in there. And so he made it easier for the next generations to come after him. It made it easier for them to make choices to follow God's plan for Abraham and God's plan for the children of Israel. And when you look at it there, he buried his beloved Sarah there, the wife who he loved so much, and so many stories in the Old Testament about that. And then you think he also buried there, he buried his beloved son Isaac in that tomb. He also buried his daughter-in-law Rebecca in that tomb. And think of all the stories around those great people I've just mentioned. Think of all the stories. Think of all the people they touched. Think of the faith that has been passed down. But it goes on. He also buried his grandson Jacob there. He's also, his grandson's wife Leah was buried there in that place. And so in a single purchase, which he did in a godly manner, Abraham left his descendants the land of promise. In every act that you and I do before our family, our friends, our loved ones, we're leaving them either a hope of heaven or the hope of the opposite to heaven. I'm not going to mention it. But we're leaving them the hope of heaven by the transactions, by the actions that we take today. Abraham is a very big lesson for us. Can people walk in our footsteps? Can people follow our footsteps and trace them to the cross, and trace them from the cross to heaven, which is the promised land that the Bible has promised all of us. And they're going to see that, seniors, in your life, in my life. They're going to see that, parents, in your life and my life lived out in front of them. The theme of the Bible, all through the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, is God's people providing reminders for the goodness of the children coming behind them. In the story of the Old Testament, we see some set up monuments. Others tell stories. And that's good. Some of you might be into monuments. And what's the monuments we can leave? It's morning worship, evening worship. It's a well-read well-read Bible. It's the little habits that you do, the praying before meals, the praying after meals, the little notes around the home that show you that this family belongs to God. For me, I could never get away from the fact that on the door when I walked out, every time I walked out the door was the saying, Christ is the head of this home, the unseen guest. Some of you are memorising, almost forgotten that, but it comes back to my heart all the time. And I think that's why 4 of us kids are now pastors, because Mum left a godly legacy by tacking it up on the door there. What are the monuments that you can leave? What are the little things that you can do in your everyday life in your home? It might even be a promise on the car steering wheel cover. And what are the stories you're telling? You know, I'm here today because of stories in my life where I've seen God work. I told you last week about Warrnambool. That was a wild part of Australia. And my heritage comes there on my mum's side. And my great-grandfather was one of the rescue people. And he had his own little rescue boat that he'd row out by hand to the distressed ships that were sinking. And he'd rescue and bring in as many people as he could. And he brought in hundreds. He'd go out in the wild winds of the night and muscle his way in. And he's so well known in that town that his boat is in the Port Fairy Museum. And I can't wait to one day go and see his boat. I want to touch it, because you know why? I've taken a bit of his heritage. I rescue souls. That's why I do middle meals. And I build on that heritage. And that's a story I can tell my kids. Another story, you guys come through it with me. That fires that came through Gidgeganup that nearly wiped a few of us out, and we were just praying our hearts out that God would do it. I'm human. I thought my house had gone that night, and I had a sleepless night. I didn't sleep until Ray rang me and showed me the DVD that the house was still standing. And now, every time I look at the charcoal at the gate of my house, I know that I'm in the hand of God. I know that God is guiding me. I know that He's protecting me. And I need to keep on reminding my kids that God saved our house. There's no other way. And God saved your property too. And others in our church who have lived up in those hills, you know that God saved your property. We've got to tell those stories on. We've got to share them to others, because people need to find the way, and they find that through our very life. So, church, I want to set in place a new resolve, a new reason, a new emphasis, no matter how old we are, that the biggest job we can do is not announcing hymns at the front of church, or not even taking up the offering. Yes, we need them all. We need all that. The biggest job in our church we can do is passing on the faith that God has given us through wonderful stories, passing that on to our next generations. And here in this church, when we gather here on a Sabbath morning, it's the new ones. It's the precious little kids. It's the ones that want to see Jesus. They need to see it in our lives because of the way we live, the way we speak, the way that my life shows that I have a legacy to give you. And also because we're passing on monuments and stories. Because we don't want the gospel of Jesus to die out in our generation. We're building today people who will sit in these pews tomorrow. And I want to pray and ask God to place them in my heart. People who will build and be a part of these church pews tomorrow. And that's the biggest legacy that we can give to Swan Valley Seventh-day Adventist Church. May God keep us faithful to be legacy givers because we are the evidence for God.